He arrived before most people and left after nearly everyone was gone. The building was quiet when he pushed his cleaning cart through the long hallways, the kind of quiet that made every small sound feel bigger than it was. The wheels of the cart squeaked softly. The mop bucket sloshed with each turn. He liked these hours because no one asked questions and no one looked at him for too long. He wore the same plain uniform every day. The fabric had faded from many washes, and the name tag on his chest was scratched and hard to read. Most people did not bother trying to read it anyway. To them, he was just the custodian. Someone who cleaned up after others. Someone who blended into the background, like the walls or the lights. The building he worked in was not ordinary. It was a respected performing arts hall, attached to a school where young singers, musicians, and performers came to chase big dreams. During the day, the place was full of sound. Pianos echoed from practice rooms. Voices rose and fell as students rehearsed. Teachers corrected notes, posture, breathing. Everyone seemed to be reaching for something higher. But when night came, the hall belonged to him. He cleaned the floors where famous performers had once stood. He wiped dust from seats that had held proud families and excited crowds. Sometimes he paused near the stage and looked out at the empty rows, imagining what it must feel like to stand under those bright lights. Then he would shake his head, remind himself of his job, and keep moving. Most students barely noticed him during the day. If they did, it was only to step around his cart or sigh impatiently if he was in the way. Some whispered jokes when they thought he could not hear. Others treated him politely but distantly, the way people often do when they do not expect a real conversation. He never reacted. He never complained. He kept his eyes low and his movements calm. Years of being overlooked had taught him how to disappear in plain sight. What no one seemed to notice was the small habit he had while working alone. When the hall was empty and the doors were locked, he would put in his old wired earphones. They were scratched and slightly bent, but they still worked. From his pocket came soft, crackling recordings of opera music. Old recordings. Powerful voices. Songs full of feeling. As he scrubbed the floors, he listened closely. His lips sometimes moved with the music. His breathing changed with the rise and fall of the notes. Occasionally, a quiet sound escaped him, barely louder than the hum of the lights above. He did not mean for anyone to hear. It was almost a reflex, like breathing. One evening, after a long rehearsal had run late, a few students lingered in the hall. They were tired and restless, still talking about auditions and rivalries. As they walked past the stage, they heard something unexpected. A voice. Low at first, then strong. It did not sound like a student warming up. It sounded older. Deeper. Steady. They slowed their steps and looked around, confused. The sound was coming from the center aisle, where the custodian was mopping the floor. At first, they laughed. They whispered to each other, amused by the idea. A custodian singing opera? It sounded ridiculous to them. One of them pulled out a phone, ready to record a joke. Another shook their head, smiling. The custodian did not see them. He was focused on his work, eyes closed for just a moment as he followed the music in his ears. His voice rose slightly, filling the empty space more than he realized. The laughter softened, but not because of kindness. It softened because something about the sound felt strange, unexpected. It did not match the image they had in their minds. Still, no one clapped. No one praised him. When he noticed their presence, he stopped immediately. His face flushed. He pulled the earphones out and returned to mopping as if nothing had happened. The students exchanged looks and moved on, carrying the moment with them like a funny story to share later. By the next day, whispers had spread. People talked about the custodian who sang opera to himself. Some laughed openly. Others rolled their eyes. A few tried to imitate the sound in exaggerated voices. It became a small joke in the building, something light and harmless in their minds. He heard the laughter. He always did. But he said nothing. He continued his routine, arriving early, leaving late, cleaning the same floors, wiping the same seats. If the jokes hurt, he did not show it. He had learned long ago that reacting only made things worse. At night, when the hall was empty again, he still listened to his music. But he sang less loudly now. Sometimes not at all. He focused on his breathing, on the rhythm of the mop against the floor. What no one knew was that the sound they mocked was not a joke. It was not a dream borrowed from watching others succeed. It was something that had once been real to him, something earned through years of effort. For now, that truth stayed hidden beneath the quiet movements of a man everyone thought they understood. And so part one of his story begins not with applause or praise, but with silence, routine, and a voice the world had decided not to hear yet. The laughter did not stay quiet for long. What started as a small joke between a few students slowly moved through the building like a rumor with legs. By the end of the week, almost everyone had heard about the custodian who sang opera while cleaning the halls. Some talked about it during breaks. Some brought it up before class, smiling as if it were harmless fun. Others shook their heads and said nothing, but still remembered the story. The details changed a little each time it was told. To some, he was shouting dramatically. To others, he was pretending to be a famous singer. The truth was lost in the telling. During the day, the custodian noticed more eyes on him than before. Not open stares, but quick looks when people thought he wasn't paying attention. A few students smirked as they passed him. One softly hummed an exaggerated note and laughed with a friend. Another whispered something and covered their mouth. He kept working. He wiped the mirrors in the practice rooms. He emptied trash cans full of old music sheets and coffee cups. He swept the stage after rehearsals, careful not to damage anything. His movements stayed steady, but inside, something felt tight. He had been laughed at before in other places at other times. He knew how to survive it. Still, hearing those sounds again brought back memories he preferred to keep buried. One afternoon, a voice stopped him in the hallway. "Hey," someone said, half joking. "You sing, right?" He froze for a second, then slowly turned. A group of students stood nearby, pretending to be casual. One leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Another smiled in a way that didn't reach their eyes. "I don't know what you mean," the custodian said quietly. "Oh, come on," the student replied. "We heard you. Opera, right? That's kind of different." There was laughter again. Light, playful, but sharp around the edges. The custodian nodded once, not trusting his voice. He pushed his cart forward and walked away, feeling the weight of their eyes on his back. His hands trembled slightly as he gripped the handle, but he did not stop. By the time evening came, the building buzzed with rehearsal energy. Voices warmed up. Instruments tuned. The custodian waited patiently for rooms to empty before cleaning them. He avoided the main hall until late, choosing side corridors instead. When night finally fell and the doors locked, he found himself standing alone in the vast space again. The seats stretched out in neat rows. The stage lights were dim, casting long shadows across the floor. He stood there longer than usual, mop resting against his leg. A part of him wanted to sing just once, the way he used to. Another part warned him to stay silent. Silence was safer. He chose silence. He cleaned the hall without music that night. The next day, a notice appeared on the board near the entrance. It announced an upcoming open rehearsal, inviting students to watch and learn from advanced performers. People gathered around it, talking excitedly. The custodian walked past, pretending not to notice. But someone noticed him. A staff member, known for being strict and distant, watched him from across the lobby. This person had overheard the rumors and dismissed them at first. Still, curiosity lingered. The sound described by students did not match what one would expect from a casual singer. Later that evening, while the custodian cleaned a small practice room, he heard footsteps pause outside the door. He turned, surprised to see the staff member standing there. "I've heard you sing," the staff member said calmly. The custodian's chest tightened. "I didn't mean to disturb anyone," he replied quickly. "You weren't disturbing," the other said. "You were noticeable." There was a pause. The custodian waited, unsure what would come next. "You've had training," the staff member continued. It was not a question. The custodian looked down at the floor. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he spoke softly. "A long time ago." The staff member studied him, then nodded once. "Be careful," they said. People like to turn things into jokes. With that, they walked away. The words stayed with him. That night, as he cleaned the hall again, memories returned uninvited. Small rooms filled with sound. Long hours of practice. A voice instructor tapping a piano and correcting his breathing. Applause that felt real and warm. He had not thought about those days in years. Life had changed quickly back then. Responsibilities had piled up. Money had run out. Dreams were set aside, just for a while, he told himself. That, while stretched into years. Now, standing in the same kind of hall he once dreamed of performing in, he felt both close to and far from that life. The whispers did not stop. In fact, they grew louder as more people became curious. Some wanted to hear him again. Others wanted proof. A few wanted entertainment. One evening, as he finished cleaning near the stage, a small group of students lingered instead of leaving. They pretended to check their phones, but their attention was fixed on him. "Sing something," one of them said, half smiling. The custodian shook his head. "I'm working," he replied. "Just a little," another insisted. "We won't laugh." He had heard that promise before in different forms. He picked up his mop and turned away. The students exchanged looks, disappointed but not surprised. They eventually left, their voices echoing as the doors closed behind them. Alone again, the custodian leaned against his cart, breathing slowly. His reflection stared back at him from the polished floor. A man older than his years, carrying more than he showed. He wondered how long he could keep hiding something that clearly refused to stay hidden. Outside, the night was quiet. Inside, something was building. And without knowing it, everyone in that building was moving closer to a moment that would change how they saw him forever. The days that followed felt heavier than before. The custodian noticed it in small ways. Conversations stopped when he entered a room. Smiles appeared too quickly, then faded. People were curious, but not kind enough to be honest about it. He focused on his work and told himself that nothing had really changed. Floors still needed cleaning. Trash still needed emptying. The building followed the same rhythm every day. Only he felt different inside. Late one afternoon, he found an old storage room that had been left unlocked. Inside were broken chairs, rolled-up curtains, and boxes filled with forgotten items. He pushed his cart in and began cleaning, grateful for the quiet. The room smelled of dust and old wood. Sunlight slipped through a high window, cutting the air into pale lines. As he worked, he noticed a small upright piano against the far wall. It was scratched and out of tune, clearly unused for years. He stopped, staring at it longer than he meant to. Slowly, he walked over and pressed one key. The sound was dull, but familiar. He sat down. At first, he only played a few simple notes, barely touching the keys. His hands remembered more than he expected. The music came back in pieces, like a language he had not spoken in a long time. Then he stopped himself and stood up quickly, as if caught doing something wrong. He looked around the empty room, heart racing, and returned to cleaning. That night, memories followed him home. His small apartment was quiet. No awards on the walls. No photos from the past. Just plain furniture and a single lamp that buzzed softly. He sat at the table with a cup of tea growing cold and stared at his hands. There was a time when those hands had held sheet music instead of cleaning tools. A time when his days were filled with lessons, practice, and hope. He remembered the early mornings, the strict routines, the belief that hard work would be enough. Life had other plans. A family illness had pulled him away from training. Bills piled up. The school he attended could not wait forever. One missed chance became two. Two became many. Slowly, the world he knew closed its doors, not loudly, but gently, as if expecting him to knock again someday. He never did. Instead, he took whatever work he could find. Jobs that paid the rent and kept food on the table. Singing became something private. Something he carried quietly. The next morning, the building buzzed with excitement about the upcoming open rehearsal. Students practiced harder than usual, hoping to be noticed. Teachers walked briskly through the halls, focused and sharp. The custodian moved around them, invisible again, but now carrying a secret that felt heavier than before. While cleaning near the main hall, he overheard two students talking. "Do you think it's real?" one asked. "I don't know," the other replied. "But if it is, that's kind of crazy." They noticed him nearby and fell silent. He pretended not to hear and pushed his cart away. Later that day, the same staff member from before crossed paths with him near the entrance. "You should think about it," the staff member said quietly. "Think about what?" the custodian asked. "About being heard," came the reply. The custodian gave a small, polite smile. "That time has passed." The staff member did not argue. They only said, "Sometimes the past waits." Those words stayed with him longer than he expected. That evening, the building emptied earlier than usual. The custodian finished his task slowly, delaying the moment he would leave. He found himself standing near the stage again, staring at the open space. He imagined a single note filling the room. Just one. His heart pounded, as if he were about to do something dangerous. He took a breath, deep and controlled, the way he had been taught long ago. Then he sang. Only one line. Soft, careful, but clear. The sound rose and settled into the room, touching the walls and seats. He stopped immediately, listening to the echo fade. No laughter followed. No footsteps. Just silence. He felt something loosen inside his chest. The next day, rumors shifted. Some said the custodian had real training. Others said he had been overheard singing again alone. The laughter grew quieter, replaced by curiosity and confusion. Not everyone was kind. A few still joked. A few still doubted. But something had changed. The story no longer felt small. During a break, a student approached him near the water fountain. "My grandmother listens to opera," the student said awkwardly. "She says you have to train for years to sing like that." The custodian nodded politely. "That's all," the student added, then walked away. It wasn't praise, but it wasn't laughter either. That night, the custodian returned to the storage room with the old piano. He closed the door behind him and sat down. Slowly, carefully, he played and sang, keeping his voice low but steady. For the first time in years, he did not stop himself. Outside that room, the building slept, unaware that something long buried was beginning to wake. And as the sound filled the dusty space, the custodian understood one simple truth. Once a voice is ready to return, silence can only hold it back for so long. The open rehearsal day arrived sooner than expected. From early morning, the building felt different. There was nervous energy in the air, like before a storm. Students warmed up their voices more carefully. Teachers spoke in lower, serious tones. Every sound seemed sharper, more important. The custodian arrived as usual, pushing his cart through the side entrance. He noticed the tension right away. People moved faster. Some barely looked at him. Others looked a little longer than before, as if wondering something but unsure how to ask. He told himself it was just another day. His tasks were the same. Clean the practice rooms. Check the hallways. Prepare the main hall for the evening rehearsal. He focused on the list in his mind, not on the thoughts pressing against his chest. By late afternoon, the main hall was nearly ready. Chairs were aligned. The stage lights were tested. Music stands were placed carefully. The custodian worked quietly, wiping the last rows of seats while students gathered near the stage. He planned to finish quickly and leave before the rehearsal began. But plans have a way of changing. A voice echoed across the hall. "We're missing one singer." Another voice replied, annoyed. "They said they were sick. We can't wait any longer." There was movement near the stage. Teachers spoke in short, urgent sentences. Students whispered, glancing at the clock. The custodian kept cleaning, eyes down, hoping no one would notice him. Then someone did. A student near the aisle leaned toward another and whispered something. That second student turned and looked straight at the custodian. Their eyes widened slightly. Soon more heads turned. The custodian felt it before he saw it. The sudden attention, the shift in the room. His shoulders tightened. A voice carried across the hall. "He sings." The words were not loud, but they traveled. A few people laughed nervously. Others looked unsure. A teacher raised a hand, signaling for quiet. The custodian froze, mop still in his hands. "This is not a joke," the teacher said firmly. Silence followed. Someone else spoke, hesitant but curious. "Is it true?" The custodian wished the floor would open beneath him. He turned slowly and faced the stage. Dozens of eyes watched him now. Some curious, some doubtful, some kind, some sharp. "I'm just doing my job," he said softly. The teachers stepped closer.
"We're short one voice," they said.
"You don't have to, but if you can, it would help." The custodian swallowed hard. His mouth felt dry. His heart pounded so loudly, he was sure others could hear it. He shook his head once. "I'm not prepared." "We don't need perfect," the teacher replied. "We need honest." The hall felt very large, very quiet. Memories rushed in all at once. Lessons, stages, auditions, doors closing, years of silence. He looked at the stage, at the lights, at the empty space where someone else was supposed to stand. Then he looked at the floor. Slowly, he set the mop aside. A small sound moved through the room.
"Surprise."
Whispers. He walked toward the stage, each step heavy and uncertain. He could feel his hands shaking, so he clasped them together. When he reached the edge of the stage, he stopped. "I haven't sung like this in a long time," he said quietly. "That's all right," the teacher answered. He stepped up. The lights felt warmer than he remembered. The space felt larger. His breath came fast, then slowed as he focused, the way he had been trained to do. A few students exchanged looks, unsure whether to expect something funny or something embarrassing. The custodian closed his eyes. Then he sang. The first note was gentle, controlled. It did not shout. It did not show off. It simply existed. The room changed. Whispers stopped. Smiles faded. Phones lowered. His voice grew stronger, filling the hall with steady power. Each note was clear, shaped with care. The sound carried, not forced, not rushed. People sat still, afraid to move. The custodian felt it too. The way the sound wrapped around him. The way his body remembered what to do. He sang as if time had folded in on itself. When the final note faded, no one spoke. The silence stretched. Then someone exhaled. Slowly, the room came back to life. Chairs shifted. A few people wiped their eyes, surprised by their own reactions. The teacher nodded, once, deeply.
"Thank you," they said.
The custodian stepped back, heart racing, unsure what to do next. No one laughed. No one clapped either. But something far more powerful filled the room. Respect. As he stepped down from the stage and returned to his cart, people made space for him. Not out of pity, out of recognition. He picked up his mop again, hands steadier now. That night, as he finished his work and prepared to leave, he glanced once more at the stage. For the first time in years, it did not feel like something forbidden. It felt like a door, slightly open, and the sound of his voice still lingered in the hall, long after he walked away. The next morning, the building felt quieter, even though it was full of people. The sound from the night before had settled into the walls like a memory that refused to fade. Those who had been there walked differently now. They spoke a little softer. They listened more. The custodian arrived at his usual time. Same uniform, same cart, same slow steps. But something inside him had shifted. He did not feel proud exactly. He felt exposed, as if a light had been turned on in a room he had kept dark for years. As he pushed his cart down the hallway, people noticed. Not with laughter, with curiosity. A student passed him and nodded. Another said a quiet good morning. Someone else stepped aside to let him through, meeting his eyes for a moment longer than usual. He returned each gesture politely, unsure how to respond to this new attention. Word spread quickly. Not in jokes this time, but in careful retellings. People spoke about how the hall went silent, about the way the sound filled the room without effort, about how unexpected it was. Those who had missed it wished they had been there. During a break, two teachers stood near the entrance, talking in low voices. It wasn't luck, one said. No, the other agreed. That comes from training. The custodian heard only pieces as he passed, but it was enough to make his chest tighten again. Later that afternoon, a staff member stopped him near the supply closet. "There will be another rehearsal tonight," they said. "Would you consider staying?" The custodian hesitated. "I have work to finish." "We can arrange that," the staff member replied gently. He nodded, not trusting himself to speak. As evening came, students filled the hall again. Some whispered when they saw him near the back. Others watched quietly. No one mocked him. No one challenged him. He stayed close to his cart, feeling safer beside familiar tools. The teacher from the night before stepped onto the stage. "Before we begin," they said, "there's something I want to address." The room stilled. They spoke about respect, about assumptions, about how talent does not always arrive wearing the clothes we expect. Then they turned toward the custodian. "If you're willing," the teacher said, "we'd like to hear you again." A pause followed. Not awkward. Anticipated. The custodian looked down at his hands. He thought about the years he had stayed silent, about the moment he almost lost his nerve the night before. He stepped forward. This time, he did not rush. He stood where he could see the faces clearly. Some looked hopeful. Some looked unsure. Some looked moved already. He took a breath.
And sang.
The sound rose stronger than before, steadier, filled with quiet confidence. It carried weight now, not just skill. The room responded. You could feel it in the stillness, in the way no one shifted in their seats. When he finished, applause came slowly at first, then grew. He bowed his head once, overwhelmed. Afterward, people approached him one by one. Not crowding, not demanding, just offering thanks. A few asked gentle questions. How long had he trained? Why had he stopped? He answered only what he felt ready to share. That night, walking home, the city lights looked different. Brighter. Closer. He wondered what it would mean to keep going. To step forward instead of back. The following days brought small changes. He was invited to listen in on rehearsals. Someone offered to tune the old piano in the storage room. Another asked if he would consider joining a workshop. Nothing was forced. Everything was offered. He still cleaned the floors. He still pushed the cart. But now people greeted him by name. Most importantly, he greeted himself differently. Late one evening, alone again in the hall, he stood on the stage and looked out at the empty seats. He sang softly, not to impress anyone, but to remind himself that his voice still belonged to him. For the first time in years, the future did not feel closed. It felt unfinished. And he was ready to see where it might lead. Time moved forward, but not in a rush. The days after the second performance felt calm and careful, as if everyone was learning a new way to exist in the same space. The building still echoed with music, but now there was something else mixed into the sound. Awareness. The custodian kept his routine. He arrived early. He cleaned carefully. He finished his work with the same quiet pride as before. What changed was not his job, but how people treated him while he did it. Students greeted him, without surprise now. Some asked how his day was going. Others thanked him for keeping the rooms clean. A few stopped to talk about music, choosing their words with respect. He listened more than he spoke, answering honestly, but simply. He did not try to become someone new. He only allowed more of himself to be seen. One afternoon, a small note was left on his cart. It thanked him for the courage to step forward. It said his voice reminded someone why they started studying music in the first place. There was no name on it. He folded the note carefully and placed it in his pocket. The open rehearsals continued, and sometimes he was invited to stand in the back and listen. Other times, he was asked if he would like to sing a short section. He never felt pressured. He chose his moments, learning to trust his instincts again. There were still people who doubted. A few who believed luck played a role. A few who felt uncomfortable admitting they were wrong. He accepted that too. Not everyone needs to understand. One evening, after most people had gone home, he stood alone on the stage once more. The lights were low, the seats empty. He sang quietly, letting the sound rise and fall without effort. This time he smiled. Not because anyone was listening, but because he was. Weeks later, a small performance was arranged. Nothing formal, just an evening of shared music. Students, teachers, staff, and a few guests filled the hall. The custodian helped prepare the space, then changed into simple clothes he had saved for special occasions. When his turn came, he walked onto the stage without hesitation. The applause that followed was warm, not loud. Genuine. He sang with control and ease, not trying to impress, only to express. Each note carried years of patience, loss, and quiet strength. When it ended, the room rose to its feet. He bowed, feeling something he had not felt in a long time. Belonging. Life did not suddenly become perfect. He did not leave his job overnight. He did not chase fame or attention. Instead, he found balance.
Cleaning by day.
Singing when invited. Practicing when the building slept. Opportunities appeared slowly. A local group asked if he would join a small project. A teacher offered guidance without pressure. Someone connected him with others who understood the path he had walked. He chose carefully. He had learned the value of time. One morning, as he polished the floor near the entrance, a new custodian walked by, nervous and quiet. The man nodded, offering a small smile. "Take your time," he said gently. The building felt different now, not because of him alone, but because people had learned something important. That talent does not always wear a title. That voices deserve patience. And that respect should never be based on assumptions. On his way out that night, he stopped at the center of the hall and looked around once more. The space no longer felt distant or unreachable. It felt like home. He turned off the lights and closed the door behind him, carrying his voice forward into whatever came next. Not as a custodian, not as a surprise, but simply as himself.